One of the most powerful forces of the 19th and 20th century was nationalism. It was the cause of many wars and genocide. Today we'll look at the origins of nationalism and the role it played in the unification of Italy and Germany. The first thing we want to look at is how you identify yourself. Is it your religion? Is it your ethnicity? Is it your nationality? Your age? Your last name? The clan you belong to? The town you live in? Today we could identify ourselves in many different ways, but the most important appears to be the nation, that you are an American. In the past, it could have been your religion or the town you're from or your clan, but those things don't matter as much. Therefore, nationalism has played a major role in modern history. Nationalism is based on the two concepts of a nation and a state, and it's important to distinguish those before we progress. A nation is part of a community that shares things in common, shares institutions, it shares traditions, religions, customs. All the people in a nation share things in common. The state is the government, the political unit. It's a very clear country with boundaries that are set up. So a nation is something more nebulous, a group of people that you belong to, and the nation is a very clear-cut political institution. Nationalism is based on two principles, and these are very important. The first is that your loyalty should be to your nation above anything else. The second is that every single nation should have its own state, its own government. So where should German people live? Germany. Where should Italian people live? Italy. Where should French people live? France. And so forth. It becomes a problem when a nation does not have a state. Like the Palestinians, they don't have Palestine. Or the Kurds in Iraq don't have Kurdistan. And therefore many people have died for this principle, and many people have fought wars in order to get their own country. The origins are pretty clear-cut. The French Revolution, the people fought for France and not for a person, the monarch. It was one of the first instances where people were fighting for a particular national group. The Industrial Revolution destroyed local loyalties and restored loyalty to a larger entity, the nation. It also instituted universal education, which helped people become more nationalistic. Cultural nationalism is a step in creating a national identity through cultural items, such as a common history, common clothes, common food, common literature, common folk stories. These things are very important in forming a common bond. It's interesting that nations are imagined communities. They're made up. Flags, food, all those things are made up. America, for example, did not exist 500 years. It's something that humans created. Another interesting fact is that when your nation is attacked in a war, you become more nationalistic. After September 11th, when the United States was attacked, people became more patriotic, more proud to be an American. There's also a kind of a dirty or nasty aspect of nationalism, sometimes called radical nationalism. This is when your membership in a nation is based on blood. If you don't have that blood, then you can't be a part of the nation. It's kind of a not clear concept of how you determine who has that blood or not. But if you don't have German blood, for example, it was held in the past that you couldn't be a member of Germany. And the only way to get rid of you is to kill you or to have you moved out of the country by force. Before we jump into the unification of Italy and Germany, I want to just explore the Crimean War for a second. It's based on the fact that the Ottoman Empire, which ruled Eastern Europe, was falling apart. And the Eastern question was who was going to take over that land. A war erupted between the Ottoman Empire and Russia over the Orthodox Christians living under the Ottoman Empire. Fearful of the advance of the Russians, France and Great Britain decided to join the Ottoman Empire and fight Russia. It was a very one-sided battle, and the Austrians, the allies of the Russians, did not come to their help, and therefore Russia lost pretty handedly to the French, Great Britain, and the Ottomans. The result is that Russia was kind of humiliated. France and Great Britain grew in prestige, and Austria and Russia, which had been allies, were now enemies. Now let's turn to, with that background information about the Crimea War, to the establishment of Italy. There's a couple of key elements in terms of the unification of Italy. It was broken up into many different little states. Okay, these little states were dominated by Austria. Okay, and the Austrians were unpopular in Italy. Now, it's a different type of revolution. It's a revolution from above. It's a revolution dictated by the monarchs. Now, this is not a revolution by the people in the streets, the poor people. As I mentioned, one of the key elements is that they were dominated. The Austrians dominated many of the states in northern Italy. Now, there was many liberal nationalists. These are people that are supporting the middle class, and they went to the streets and they attempted to unify Italy through revolution from below, from the people in the streets, and they failed. There was revolutions in 1820, 1830, 1848. All of these were crushed by the Austrians and their supporters. What ends up happening is that one of the kingdoms, the Kingdom of Sardinia, takes the leadership in the unification of Italy. They are led by a Prime Minister, Count Camille de Cavour, who is a liberal. He expressed some of the sympathies of the liberals who were trying to unify Italy previously. The king of Sardinia was Victor Emmanuel II, and he would later become the king of Italy. So, as we can see in this map, that previous unification of Italy, it was about half a dozen small states and all broken up. The first thing they do is Sardinia forms an alliance with France. Napoleon, who's the ruler of France, is very bellicose and wants to fight. Austrian wants to restore the legacy of military success that he had under his uncle, Napoleon I. Now, Sardinia, with the help of France, attacks Austria, and they're victorious. And they gain that yellow mustard-colored territory called Lombardy. The other northern states around Sardinia and Lombardy overthrow their governments, and they vote to join Sardinia. So that's Parma, Modena, and Tuscany have these northern revolutions, and they join Sardinia. In the south, in the kingdom of the two Sicilies, Giuseppe Garibaldi rises up and rebels against the monarch. He starts a revolution, and he takes over land in the south. Garibaldi meets up with Cavour, and he agrees that he's not going to have a civil war between the south and the north. He lays down his weapons, and he unifies the southern conquest with the northern states that have already joined Sardinia. They proclaim the Kingdom of Italy in 1861. Victor Emmanuel is now the King of Italy instead of just the King of Sardinia. There are two pieces left to the puzzle of Italy. One is Venice, which was controlled by Austria. When Austria was attacked by Germany in 1866, Italy took Venice. And then Rome, which was being protected because it was Catholic by the French monarch. When France was attacked by Germany, the Italians went in and seized Rome from the Pope. And therefore, by 1870, the Italian peninsula had been unified, and all Italians now were living in one country, Italy. And we can see this is a key principle for nationalism, getting everybody in one country. Germany has a very similar tradition towards Italy. Historically, it was even more broken up, as you can see this map from the 1700s, into hundreds of little states. The two major players were Austria, which controlled a lot of Germany, which it had a mustard kind of color in this picture, and Prussia, which was more to the north, an up-and-coming power, which is colored blue in this picture. There's the beginning of German nationalism, this idea that all Germans should be proud of being Germans and live in Germany. The Romantic cultural figures were one of the first people, particularly the poets, wrote about how they should write in German and not in French, which was the language of most authors at the time, and that the Germans should be unified and be a great country. Again, the liberals tried in their revolutions in 1830 and most importantly in 1848. They had a revolution to create a new Germany and give it to the king of Prussia, but he refused. Meanwhile, Prussia is becoming more and more powerful. They're the most German of the states. They're the most militaristic, and they become the leader of German nationalism. The Chancellor of Prussia is Otto von Bismarck. He's a Prussian aristocrat. He's a very conservative individual. He serves as a civil servant, which means that he is a government official his whole life. And his goal was to increase his status as a civil servant and then also increase the status of Prussia as a world power. And he believed that this war of unification was not going to come from below. It was not going to come from people in the streets. Rather, it would come through war, through fighting other countries. And so Otto von Bismarck, called the blood and iron chancellor, somebody that isn't going to negotiate but use blood and iron to get his way, forges Germany through wars of unification. First, they attack the country of Denmark in the Danish War over two principles in the north, and you can see on this map, Schleswig and Holstein. There were Germans living there. And where should Germans be living? Well, in Germany, not in Denmark. Danish people live in Denmark. So Austria and Prussia both fought Denmark, and it was very lopsided. And Schleswig and Holstein were broken away from Denmark, and then control was given over to Austria-Hungary and Prussia. Then there was a disagreement several years later between Prussia and Austria, and there was a war between Prussia and Austria in 1866, which Prussia was very successful. They pushed Austria out of internal German matters, and they formed the Northern German Confederation. Therefore, Prussia basically seized control over all that purple land, which is Prussia itself, and also that light brown territory became part of the Northern Confederation. The countries in the south, which are light green here, were not unified yet. They were still independent. The third war was with France. There was tension with France and Prussia because of who would become king of Spain. Originally, there was a German prince that was going to become king of Spain, and France did not want that. And there was insults lobbied back and forth. Eventually, it boils over, and Prussia, egged on by Bismarck, attacks France. And that was called the Franco-Prussian War. It was a resounding success for the Prussians. They defeated Napoleon III and captured him, and Prussia has now defeated all the major powers surrounding it. When they were in France, actually in Versailles, in the Hall of Mirrors, the German Empire was declared. All the princes that represented the small states in Germany, including the independent states to the south, gave the Prussian king the title of the Emperor of Germany, and they formally formed the German Empire in 1871. What you realize is that this was not, again, a revolution from below, from the poor people fighting the street, but a revolution from above, the princes overthrowing the various countries and making a king and emperor. The new Germany was not really German, but it was Prussia. It was very militaristic, it was very autocratic, it was ruled by a monarch. So we see here nationalism. It's a very important force. This belief that you should have loyalty to your nation, that your nation is the most important entity, that you should die and fight for your nation. And your belief that your nation, whatever it is, should have its own country, its own state. So therefore, Italy, there was no such thing as Italy in the early 1800s. But the Italians said we should have Italy. And they fought for it, and they got it. Germany, there was no such thing as Germany. The Germans believed they should have their own country, and they did. And they formed their country, Germany. And the problem arises, what happens to the other minorities in Italy and Germany that are not Italians and Germans. We'll see that play out in the 20th century. Nationalism formed a new Europe. A lot of these small principalities were eliminated, and large nation states were constructed in their place. Particularly, you have two new powerful states, Germany, which is the most powerful country in Europe now, and Italy, another new powerful country, but not quite as powerful as Italy. Next class, we'll look at what happens when national pride overruns, and you have the formation of national empires as they seize territory in other countries, particularly in the new imperialism where they seized territory in Africa and